John Compton, local Harlow councillor. The question is in two parts really. First of all, what do you say to people on the doorstep about the human migration, and what do you think Labour's policy response ought to be?
Thank you for your question. I'm going to come back, and obviously points that have been made so far are all relevant and valid, but if I'm going to say what I would say to people on the doorstep, is when they talk about immigration, coming in, obviously, a daughter of immigrants myself, the first thing I say to them, what do you actually mean by that? Because when you actually start delving deeper, what they are actually talking about isn't immigration, they're talking about housing, jobs, the economy, the environment they live in. So it isn't really immigration. Though, it's very easy to blame others for the problems that are in your own country, and it's always the outsiders that people blame. But actually, the issues that are facing the people on that doorstep when you're talking to them is exactly the same as it is everywhere in the country, and it's very easy to use immigration as a problem. And I think the Labour's response to that should be that actually it's a conversation that we need to have. I think it's always been an elephant in the room when it's come to our party, and it was a big problem that we actually faced during the 2010 general election, where we didn't actually talk about people's fears, and didn't actually address their concerns. And I think what we need to do is actually have that conversation and listen to people and take on what they are saying, because until we do, we are allowing the right wing, UKIP, the Tories, to actually have the say on immigration, and a lot of what's being spouted is a load of old rubbish. That's what I do.
Juanita Foreman, Labour councillor in Harlow. Chris already touched on this. Given the banking, Val, Luxembourg and River judgment in the European Court of Justice, what's the future national and regional union collective bargaining agreements and the Social Europe project?
Actually, to look at it from a different perspective as well, I think that European collaboration is actually vital if we're going to make any changes to the global environment as well. Things that have happened in, say, Bangladesh recently, I don't think Britain on its own can actually lobby the Bangladeshi government to actually improve workers' rights, which desperately need doing, because they are the countries that we actually trade with and get goods from. I think it needs some, the Europeans actually agreed in Europe to actually go and lobby those sorts of industries. And it's not just Bangladesh, it's happening in other parts of Asia, it's happening in Africa, it's happening in Brazil, some of those emerging economies, people are being abused, in my opinion, to actually produce goods cheaply for us to use. And the only way we're going to actually be able to ensure this going on is by having more socialists and Labour MEPs in Europe, because it's clear that the right-wing parties aren't really interested in workers' rights. And I'm already proud of what Europe has delivered for us already in terms of workers' rights, working time directive, the ability to have paid leave. But I don't think we've gone far enough. But unless people, the electorate, both in Europe and in the UK, actually elect us to actually give that voice, I don't think that much can be done. So I urge everybody, get that Labour vote out.
Question about how candidates see Europe developing and how what role Britain can play within it. For example, we haven't actually touched on the issue of the euro and the euro crisis in Europe.
Thank you.
Euro crisis in 2 minutes.
Wow. I don't think I'm going to try and resolve the euro crisis in 2 minutes, but I think it's an interesting question that you ask. And personally, I think in terms of the actual euro currency and integration, I think that I always said never say never. The door is still open for us to actually join the currency in the future should the economic conditions be better. But I can talk more about closer integration, and I personally think it's inevitable, because right now there's a lot of this anti-European stance that some of the countries seems to be taking is purely based on the fact that we would be stronger on our own outside of the European Union. But personally, I think that's actually total rubbish. For us to actually have any sort of say globally, we need to be part of the European Union. We are a very small island. We're only the 8th richest economy in the world now, soon to be be overtaken by the likes of the BRIC countries, Brazil, India, China, South Africa, Russia. And the only way that we're going to be able to trade with those blocs is by being a part of Europe, not outside of it, which is what some people are actually trying to suggest. And furthermore, I mean, America's already made it clear the reason it keeps its ties with with Britain is for its springboard to those businesses and that trade that it can actually do in Europe. So that's where I see it going. I think more integration is coming, not less. And how that happens is going to be, I think some of it's going to be forced, actually. It's going to be forced on the UK. I know some people have said yes, but we'll be able to trade with the Commonwealth nations. I think there is hell cooking land if they think they're doing that. India's made it very clear that they've got no intention of trading with the imperialist past. And I quite agree with them. I think we are better in Europe, with closer ties with Europe, because it will actually be better for our population here.
Frank Jackson, and now for something completely different, as they say. The UK and the other four primary nuclear weapon powers have been committed to negotiate their total abolition since 1970. No such negotiations had ever taken place, and there are still thousands of weapons around the world. Will you support moves to create a nuclear weapon-free zone in Europe as a step towards the total abolition, and for the UK to take a lead in this by abandoning its own nuclear weapons? More generally, building on the original impetus for the European Union, will you work for the EU to promote peaceful rather than military solutions to conflict situations?
I'm not sure that's 3 or 4 questions.
I would say if we lived in a utopia, then yes, absolutely, you'd want a nuclear-free world where we actually negotiated in a peaceful, civilised manner. But unfortunately, I think what we are doing as a country at the moment, and the rest of the nuclear-armed world, is it's very easy to patronise those countries, such as Iran, North Korea, Pakistan, India, and say to them, you know what? You guys aren't allowed to have a nuclear deterrent, but we, the Western world, can have all the nuclear weapons we want. And the only way that we are actually going to come to a nuclear-free world is actually if unilaterally United States, NATO, Britain, France all come together and actually say, do you know what, we're all going to get rid of them at the same time, which might actually start making the other countries work. But I don't think that just 1 or 2 countries getting rid of nuclear weapons is going to actually bring peace, bring peace to the world. I think we need to concentrate a bit more on actually speaking to each other and understanding our differences as well. And that's the only way we're going to start getting on. And maybe also, I don't necessarily agree that in things like Syria at the moment that we should even be trying to arm the rebels. I think that one of the things that we should be doing is actually not trying to arm anybody, because all we're doing is actually just creating the situation, and then depending on which side wins, which has happened in many countries, we'll go, oh, we supported them, and if we did support them, we'll say, oh, no, we didn't support them. So actually, I don't think that any country should actually be arming any rebels or not anybody, because they're just fueling to the problems. We don't live there. And the hardships that we're bringing on people in the world by getting involved in military conflicts, I think is totally wrong. Vested interest. I'm a practicing Hindu. I believe in peace and I believe in negotiation and talking to people.
Okay, thanks very much.
It's likely, the way things are now, that several of you are going to be elected to the European Parliament. I'm a firm believer that what is happening now, this could happen. What does concern me is what's happening generally that affects Europe, what is happening now in Turkey, right on the border of Syria. What is your attitude going to be to working for peace in Europe? And let's face it, many, many dictators, including Assad, was educated in this country. Many of them educated here. Now we should surely be able to go out and have some impact on the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
I love the optimism. It'd be fantastic if we were all elected. But what I will say is that the European elections do give me a little bit of, hope, I suppose. It's the only time, living in the east of England, that my actual vote counts. So I think this is the one time where it doesn't matter where you live in the east of England, you can actually vote Labour and you can actually make a difference. So that's what I always remember when I'm knocking on doors, wherever I am. In terms of what Europe's role in peace, I think what nobody's mentioned so far is that we have to remember that it's because of the existence of Europe that we've had peace for 60 years. And I think that's just really speaks for itself. I don't think I need to go on and say about the importance of Europe and how Europe can actually play a part. We haven't had any major wars since the Second World War. And because of that, I think the European Union needs to carry on working and actually bringing in as many members as possible, which is why, whilst I can't say in Turkey they do have democratically elected government, and I don't think it's right for us to try and encourage an overthrow of a government that has been elected, quite rightly and properly, but we do have to speak up when human rights are being abused, which they clearly are in the way the police are treating some of the demonstrators. But at the same time, I think we have to work with Turkey in making them viable so they can actually join the European Union. It's a very, very strategic country. It is the gateway to Asia. And for that reason, I think whilst we watch, we also actually help them and get them to join as soon as possible. And at the same time, we continue to not just work for peace in Europe, but actually work with the rest of the world for peace in other countries as well.